It's Kendra, and today my video is going to be about my history and where I come from and just more about me. Recently there's been a few people that was like, put Kendra on, and so I kind of did my hair a little bit, put myself together a little bit, and thought I'd make this video about who I am and where I come from and how I got to be where I'm at today. So I'm going to try to hold a camera like this the whole time, because I know that was a big issue in my previous video where I keep wanting to go like that the whole time. So I'm just out here with my dogs. Thought I'd put them outside while I'm doing this, and there's a bee. Kill two birds with one stone. So I'm out here with the dogs so they can do their business as well. Hi, Mama. The brown one is Milo, and the black one is Liho. Those are my babies, since I can't have any babies. But we'll get to that in just a second. So, I was born in Edmonds, Washington, November 29th, 1986. And that was my big first question. How was I born, or how was I raised in Portland, but born in Edmonds? That never made any sense to me at all. I was like, I probably should have been born in Portland, because my mom is from the Portland metro area, and my dad is from Eugene, who ended up moving to Portland later on. So I'm like, Mom, how did you get to being from Portland to Edmonds, Washington? That's kind of a drive. That's like almost Canada, I believe. And so, come to find out, my mom was madly in love with some Canadian guy named Ron. And it would have taken her years and years and years to finally put him to rest, even after being with my dad. And even into my teenage years, she was still secretly in love with him, but they didn't talk. So apparently my mom and dad separated, and my mom went to Edmonds, Washington to meet up with her Canadian lover and try to start a life with him. Apparently he stood her up. She went all that way for nothing. He never even showed up. Which I guess I'm grateful for, because if he did show up, I probably wouldn't be alive today, or I'd have a different family or something. So he never showed. My dad was madly in love with my mom, because she has always been into cars. She had a 1989, I think, Dodge Dart, and she would always show that off in her car shows, and she was really into the car shows. But we'll get to that. Jumping ahead. So my dad was madly in love with my mom, so when she split to Edmonds, Washington, my dad followed her, tracked her down. He wasn't going to let her go, apparently. And so Ron never showed up. My dad finally got to my mom in Edmonds, and they had me. So maybe I was a sympathy baby or a makeup baby. You know how people have breakup sex? Maybe they had makeup sex. And here I am. So about 2 years later, my family got some terrible news. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, I don't know how many greats it was, my great-great-grandfather, he passed away. And my mom's parents, or my mom's grandparents, was like her parents. My mom never had a really good relationship with her mom. She was also more closer with her dad. But her grandparents were like her parents. So when they found out when I was 2 years old and they were living in Washington that he died, they immediately went back to Portland to have his funeral service. I assume, I don't remember it. I was only 2 years old. So then I was raised in Portland all my life. I guess the first big thing I could tell you, and there's so many like little stories I could tell you, but I will just go through the main big points of how I got to be here. I remember my grandfather, which is my dad's dad, he died August 10th of 2000. He was a pedestrian in Portland, in southeast Portland. He was crossing the street, had the right of way, I assume. There was a lot of times where he didn't have the right of way and still walks, but my phone is going down, so I gotta make this quick. I don't know why I always do this when my phone is like going dead. So he ended up getting hit by a guy. I don't know if he was drunk or something, but that was a whole big thing. The day that he died, we had plans to go to the Oregon coast. We had reservations and everything set up. I checked the voicemail. I had a weird dream. I had a dream that my grandfather, he was in a suit, and he looked at me, he smiled, he walked away into the light. I woke up. That startled me enough to wake me up. And I checked the voicemail. Now, my grandmother's still alive, but it's really hard for her to speak because she had 9 or 10 strokes before she ended up passing away later on. And so the voicemail, I couldn't make out what she was trying to say. But the second voicemail, she's like, Dad died, Dad died. And I know when she said Dad died, she was talking about my grandpa, my dad's dad. So I am just screaming, just in pain and agony. He was my best friend. My dad wakes up and is pissed. He thinks that my mom and I are fighting, and that's why I'm being so loud and crying, and he thought we were fighting, but we weren't. I told him Grandpa died, and we all started crying together as a family. It was really sad. Since we had plans to go to the beach, my friends came through the door, and all of us are crying. And I've never seen us like that before, ever. We're pretty much always fighting. But we were crying, not fighting. And so we were thinking, what do we do? Do we keep our plans of going to the coast, or do we cancel them? We ended up deciding as a family we're still going to go. My friends were there, all packed up. We were all packed up. We were all ready to go. So we just decided to keep everything and to go. I'm sure there would have been some cost because we had to leave that day. And if we canceled the same day, I'm sure we still would have been charged anyway. Well, I'm glad that we went. Later that night at the coast, I was always really close with my dad as well. And he said, let's go for a walk. So we walked the beach, and that night we saw a shooting star. My first shooting star I ever saw. And I was like, that's Grandpa. He's letting us know that he's all right. And that was the turning point for me. I went from this sweet little girl, and it wasn't just because of that. I went from a sweet, innocent little girl to rebellious teenager running away and all that. So after my grandfather died, when I was 12 or 13 years old, my mom had this campfire Boys and Girls Club that she had been doing for years with us, that she was the leader of. And it was for boys and girls. Well, my mom ended up trusting one of the co-leaders that she made co-leader because she needed help with the group. She ended up trusting her enough to let me stay at her house during the week at nighttime when my mom had to work late. I'd go over there and stay the night during the weekend, have slumber parties. So I ended up making best friends with the co-leader's daughter. And we had a best friend kind of friendship for 9 or 10 years. And all of that changed. During the time I was over there spending so much time with this family, the father, he was always really weird. He was security guard. He was about 500 pounds, probably 5'10", 500 pounds. He always carried a gun on his hip because he was security guard. And I was being molested, basically. And it wasn't just me, I thought. He would take turns with his kids. My best friend, Tasha, we all took turns sleeping with him in his bed. And that's when that was going on. And they always had to go into the bathroom with him when he went to the bathroom, and it was awful. So me and my best friend Tasha got together and swapped our stories of what was going on with each other with him. And I kept that a secret for about a year. I was scared. I mean, my mom had a campfire group. The co-leader was her best friend. Her daughter was my best friend. We were kind of like family. My secret would have destroyed all of that. So I kept it a secret for about a year, and I ended up calling these chat lines. Just to kind of have someone to talk to about it, someone who's completely not in the picture of my family and friend circle, just completely different, outside of that. And I ended up getting into a relationship with a guy who was 24, 23. I think he was 24. And his name was Ben. And I started dating him over the phone. And he was in Job Corps. So he can only leave Job Corps for family visits. So one of these times we made up a story that he was going to go see his cousin, but he wanted to come see me, and we started dating. Basically, he became the reason why I told my secret. He's like, if we're going to continue doing this, you need to tell your secret. So I ended up, a year or so later, I told my mom that his name was Kurt, was molesting me. I was immediately not allowed contact with them. When they come by to our house, I made up an excuse why I couldn't play. We broke contact. Called the police. The DA ended up denying the case because there was no physical evidence. I was in the 8th grade, diagnosed with PTSD. The school made it to where I could talk to the in-school counselor at any point of the school day. At any time during the school day, I could see the counselor to talk to about this. And she ended up diagnosing me with PTSD because this guy who molested me, that his family knew where we lived, and I walked to and from school every day. So the only reason I was able to get to and from school was listening to rock music, Disturbed. And that really got me through it, was the loud music, and always watching my back to see if he was following me, if he knew where I was at, because my secret came out, and I was pretty good at keeping it for a while, and so I was pretty scared. So that was the turning point between my grandfather's death and getting molested. Those were some big turning points in my life, which made me go into this older guy phase. I call it a phase because it is no longer. It was just something I did as a teenager. This was before Facebook. This was probably a little bit before MySpace, or just right before MySpace came out. So, the chat lines where it gave me a sense of being social with other people. But technically you had to be 18 to call it. But so that happened, and I ended up getting into an abusive relationship with an older guy when I was 17. That lasted for about a year. He convinced me to move away from my family, from Portland to Madras, Oregon, to be with his family. His stepdad was always really abusive. He's like, you need to stop hanging around this house all day, every day, and get a job. And when I'm told to do something, I do it. I will surprise you. So not only did I get a job, I got 2 jobs. I worked at Burger King during the night. I closed the Burger King store, from like 5 to close. And I worked at Taco Time during the day. So Taco Time during the day, Burger King during the night. I got 1 paycheck from each job and left. The guy I was with, while I was living with his family, he was very abusive to me, always taking my money that I earned. And he didn't have a job. He just was disabled and claimed SSI. So right before I left, he took my $50 and tried to hide it from me, tried to take it away from me, got on top of me and was fighting me for it. But I ended up getting the money to leave. And since I made that decision to move away from Portland to be with this guy's family, when I moved back, my family wanted nothing to do with me. They said I couldn't come home at all. So I had nowhere to go. So I ended up meeting up with my dad's mom, Grandma Stout. And I lived with her for a couple months. During that time, I had already had known some people, some friends of mine, because I was either before I got into this abusive relationship, I was in and out of a runaway shelter because I was always running away on the loose every weekend. And they ended up transferring me to Bridge House, which is an independent housing program for people who are 21 and younger. And I lived downstairs, and that was while I was in the abusive relationship. I wasn't following the rules. I wasn't doing my chores because I was in this relationship. It was all about him. So when I came back, I had nowhere to go to at that point. And I became homeless in 2005, and that's where I met my ex-husband, Alex. And we ended up being married for 4 or 5 years, probably about 4 years. Our marriage ended because he decided to choose drugs and other girls over our marriage, so that ended. I moved back home with my family in 2009. I ended up rebuilding my relationship with my family when I got married. They paid for my wedding rings and my honeymoon at the Marriott, and they paid for my wedding dress, and we end up reestablishing or reconnecting our relationships because of Alex, my ex-husband, so that was good. So I moved back home after that marriage ended. I moved back home in 2009, and I was just so depressed and so lost and crying all the time. I started getting unemployment. And so about I gotta end this, guys. I'm so sorry. I'll do part 2 later. My phone is just about to die. So I hope you enjoyed part 1 of Kendra's history. Stay tuned for part 2.